Yes, we are. Let me double check. Alicia, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Awesome. Welcome. I don't think you and I have had a chance to meet. Maybe you've met some. Have you? Okay, sweet. Do you want to take a second to introduce yourself, and then then I'll introduce myself, and we'll go from there.
Okay. My name's Alicia. I got my license just last month. So this is my second go around with Ignite.
Okay.
But I live in Mount Pleasant. So some of the time I'm able to come down and some of the time I'm on Zoom. So
Gotcha. Well, that sounds familiar. I think you might have been to our last Ignite class as well a month ago with me. Do I look familiar to
yeah.
you?
Yeah, I was.
Negotiating offers. Okay, sweet. And it's Jenna, right? No. Yeah, Jenna. Okay, Jenna and Alicia. Okay, sweet. Well, then we can focus on some of the areas maybe that you guys are a little bit more interested in. Since last time we kind of covered from the beginning to the end, maybe today we'll focus a little more heavily on specifics and stuff. But Dean, do you have anything to say?
Nothing to say for myself.
Okay, all right.
No, I just wanted
to. Okay. Well, Dean's awesome, and I've shared stories about him last time, and we'll probably get into some of that today. So, yeah, don't want to embarrass him. They're good stories. All right. Let me make sure my clicker's working, because it's not right now. Well, my clicker's not working. Sorry, Alicia, can you say something one more time? Now I hear an echo.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Your mic's off. Oh, it's back on.
There, is it good now? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, one of these should not be. I'm hearing an echo from in the room, and I don't know how to fix that. And Hunter's gone, so I guess we'll have to deal with it. Hopefully that doesn't bother. Does that bother you, Alicia, at all?
No, it's all right.
Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know why it's doing that. Okay, let's see. All right. Can you still hear me? Yes, but I can hear my echo. I'm going to text Hunter real quick. Hey. Okay, Hunter's coming down in just a second to help us fix this echo issue. You and I have met before, I believe.
Yes.
Yes, that's right. And Jake, that's right. Just the other day. Sweet. Well, this is Jenna. We have Alicia on Zoom. Have you met either of them? Yeah. Okay, awesome. Well, do you want to introduce yourself as well? Sorry, Hunter's telling me how to fix this, so I'm going to fix this real quick. How about now? Nope, that's still. Hmm. Testing, testing, testing. No, those ones are off. Hey, I tried to do that. I don't think it worked. Oh, that one.
And then you'll want this one up so you can hear the people on Zoom.
There we go. Okay, Alicia, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Awesome. Thanks, Hunter. Sorry about that. Okay, sweet. So we have Jake, Jenna, and Alicia, and Jordan. Jake, so remind us where you're from.
Yeah, so I'm from Saltwater, Colorado.
Okay.
When I was like a teenager, so let's you.
Nice. Very cool. And I know you're studying to get your test, right? Or to take your test. Oh, you did? Yay, awesome. Congrats. You got your license.
Like do really good things.
Yeah.
It's like there's this force in the world that's like, you got your back. Boom. And all this together.
That's good. That definitely happens. By the way, for Alicia's sake, I'm gonna have you guys use these. If you don't mind passing them back and forth, so she can hear us as well. But yeah, that's exciting. So now you're ready to go out and make some money. Let's do it. Let's do it. What got you into real estate?
Well, I've been selling insurance forever.
Okay.
It's nice, but I have so many friends that are selling real estate, and with Keller Williams, they're just doing better than I.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, hey, it's a good industry to be in, but it's not an easy industry to be in, right? Takes work, but if you can do your job right and you can stay focused on the right things, you can definitely make a lot of money. And when the market's really good and you focus on the right things and do your job well, then you can make a lot of money. So that's it's fun and help a lot of people. Hopefully, I know we all care about that as well. Okay, sweet. Well, I'm Jordan. To introduce myself a little bit and to remind those that maybe, so Alicia and Jenna were here at my class last month as well. But we're gonna kind of hopefully help them learn some new things today as well, or reinforce some of the things that they've learned in the past. But my background, I grew up in Orem. I did summer sales for 7 years, selling DirecTV subscriptions, and that was fun. Yeah, did you really? DirecTV? Who'd you work for? Okay, yeah. I know, Dish One. Yeah, it was probably Dish One or Caliber. Yeah, Dish One. Yeah. Gotcha. Cool. Yeah, so that's my background. So I did that for 7 years. I loved it, but I also didn't. And I wanted something more stable that didn't require us to move all the time, which now we're in the opposite. Now, if we ever move, starting over, because my business is here. My business is people I know. But I also felt like I was missing out on an opportunity to help somebody long-term, to where, because in that industry, you go knock on someone's door, they decide to buy from you 20, 30 minutes later. And then how often do you ever speak to them or hear from them ever again? Basically never, right? And so I felt like I'm missing out as a salesperson that, hey, I developed this relationship of trust with somebody. If I had something more to offer them next year or in 3 years from now, I would love to do that. But in that industry, I couldn't. And I felt like they were also missing out, because most of us want to have an expert in certain areas of our life that are very important, but that we don't necessarily want to be the expert in ourselves, right? For some people, that's taxes. For some people, that's finances, wealth building, real estate. I mean, they're even a car mechanic. Like, you want to have somebody that has your best interest at heart, that you can trust, that knows that industry. And I feel like I felt like I wanted to find something that had that element to it as well. So I can build relationships with people over time to where they can call me up and ask my opinion on something, and that I potentially can have an opportunity to help them sell. So I knew Stan Larimer, if any of you've met him, he's consistently one of the top solo agents in our office and in really all of Utah for years. And I was good friends with him and talked to him and decided to take the plunge and to jump into real estate, and have not looked back since. It's been an amazing journey. It's obviously had its ups and downs and everything in between, but it's been a lot of fun, and had the opportunity to make some money. So it's been fun, been good. But I've learned that was one of the most intriguing things to me, was that relationship could be there for long term. And that's why early on in my career, I remember specifically going to this house. It was actually, my parents have lived in the same house for 30, how old am I? 32. They've lived in the same house for 32 years. They moved in when I was 6 months old. And I'm in the Facebook group page of that neighborhood. And I saw that one of my neighbors who lives across the street and one house over from my parents, who by then I had not lived in the home for like 10 years. So I knew of that person, but I didn't really know them. And they posted on the Facebook page of the community saying, hey, we're looking to sell our house soon by owner. If you guys know of anybody that wants to buy our house, let me know. So as an agent, what do you think I did? Yeah, I decided, I didn't actually have their number though. I decided to actually knock on their door, right? And just offer, say, hey, and I knew she knew who I was. Like, my parents lived across the street. They know each other. But anyway, I just let them know. And everyone has different approaches on how you want to go about it. In that case, for me, I just let her know, say, hey, if you're interested in interviewing agents, I'd love to at least take part in that, right? And she said, you know what, actually, we have thought about it. Why don't you come over tomorrow when my husband is here and let's talk? Sweet. All right. So I got an appointment, right? I was nervous. That was the scariest door knock I've ever done. And I did it for 7 years, but it's somebody that I kind of knew. And anyway, but it worked out. But here's what the story the reason I bring up this example is because I went to the appointment, and this is something that every one of us needs to ask in our appointments when you're talking to a potential seller, especially, but also with potential buyers. When you're trying to earn their business, it's critical that you understand their experiences with other agents and who else they're talking to. What other agents might they be talking to? What does their process look like compared to ours? That's a conversation that it can be a little bit uncomfortable, because it's, you don't necessarily want to talk about that, but it can really, really help you in your sale and your potential to help them as well. So what I didn't know beforehand is that right before my appointment, she had a different realtor come to interview as well. And that I had showed up probably 10 minutes after he left. So this was fresh back-to-back interviews that they were dealing with. But luckily, I had asked that question or something along those lines of, who else are you meeting with? And that's when she told me, well, we actually just met with so-and-so. And I asked her some of those questions. What did you like about their process? What do you think they do really well? And she told me, but what she said was that and this shocked me, but I guess it happens, that realtor had told her, hey, you're not even close to ready yet. I'm not going to work with you, basically, is the message that she received. Maybe he didn't say it in those words, but she basically understood that she's not close. So I asked her, well, how soon are you looking to sell? And she said, within the next month. So I'm like, I don't know what a realtor on earth thinks that's too far, that their time is not well spent there. But again, the reason that I share that story is because if you're in this business for the long term, obviously 1 month is not a big deal, but even if they said 2 years, 3 years, what does that mean for me as an agent? Do I just walk away and never talk to them again? Or write on my calendar, in 3 years from now, make sure to give this person a call? What's going to happen between now and then? Yeah, we've got to maintain that relationship. So I don't care. You've probably heard this term, there is no bad lead. There's leads that are ready now and there's leads that are ready later, right? But there is no bad lead. So if you put them into your database, that's what this 201 Plus shirt is, that Hunter teaches the class about the 201 Club. If you can not just have people in your database, but that you have some sort of a systemized way to reach out to them and keep that relationship going, then that's the best way to maintain it, so that when they're ready, they knock on your door instead of you having to knock on theirs all the time. Now, we still do proactive lead generation, especially in this market, but you will get those opportunities come your way if you're continually reaching out to people in a non-threatening, like, hey, are you ready to buy or sell yet type of way. Right. So you can only do that so often. Anyway, a little bit off topic, but hopefully that is a good reminder for all of us. But today we're going to be talking about negotiating. So this quote, negotiating is not something to be avoided or feared. It's an everyday part of life. So the message that we talked about last month is that you want to make sure that you understand that every single one of you has experience with negotiating. You do it every day. Anytime you've ever wanted somebody to do something you want, and you have to convince that, that's negotiating, right? Anytime that you have to meet somewhere in the middle, or maybe you're on the other end and they're trying to negotiate their opinion or their desire to do something. Where do you want to go to eat? Like, that could be as simple as that, and you have to negotiate that. So all of this is negotiation. We just may not have pinpointed it on it all the time, but you do have that experience. So now it's a matter of like figuring out, okay, what are the specific steps that we take in negotiation that can really make a difference? And that's the part that we want to make sure that you nail, so that it does come more naturally, instead of having to look at a chart and say, okay, yep, I did that, now let me say this. Okay, yeah, I did that, now let me say this, right? We want it to be more natural, and it only comes with experience, but it's purposeful experience. So you have negotiating experience, but now we're going to put that together with the roadmap on what negotiating is, so that that happens, so it becomes more natural. Okay, we spent some time on this one last time, the Y4C2Ts. If you haven't, I have this printed out and I have this posted in my office, just because I think these are such good values just for life, really, but specifically for business and real estate. The more often we can do these things, not just with our clients, but also with the agents on the other side, the better off that we'll be, and the more we'll enjoy it. So the Y4C2Ts, these are some of Keller Williams's belief. This is our belief system on what we should do. In fact, no, it's not over here, but this is good. But there's a couple on here that really apply to negotiating. Jake, do you see any that you feel like?
Yeah, I like win-win or no deal.
Yeah, win-win or no deal. 100%. Yeah. Is that ever possible to get a win-win or no deal? Or I should just say to get a win-win.
If it's a win.
Yeah.
/ something not good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Almost like grandma service, like if you help your grandma in the situation, it's going to benefit her. If you feel, then it's always going to benefit you. If it's not.
Right. Absolutely. So what about in a situation where somebody is living in a distressed property, they need to move out, but they need a certain amount of money in order to buy a place that's smaller and a condo, maybe something that's easier maintained, but they can't move out unless they have a certain amount of money. What could potentially be a win-win for that person and a potential buyer?
Sorry, I was trying to understand.
You're good. Yeah, they call it Y4C2Ts. Kind of interesting. Yeah. Yeah, so let's just say that, yeah, this lady lives in a distressed home, and she can't get market value for it because the home is not in good condition. She needs a certain amount of money to go to her next move, which is to get to a condo that's going to be a lot less maintenance for her. And then there's a buyer that wants to buy that home, but is unwilling to pay the price that she hasn't listed for. Is there a way to make that a win-win? Yeah, there is some negotiating that could happen to where maybe there's a way that she has a minimum amount that she needs, and that matches what their maximum amount is to pay, or something in between, that you can make it work so where she's extremely happy, the buyer's extremely happy, and it can work out, right? That kind of stuff that's what real estate is. Now, what would be a win-lose in a situation like that if it were to happen? If both sides were to agree on an offer, what might a win-lose look like? Okay, yeah, they may take the first offer, which is way less than what she could afford, and then she can't move into her next place, right? That'd be a lose for her. Win for the buyer because they got a better deal. Really? Do you want to use this mic? So I know it's going to be inconvenient to pass it back and forth.
I've recently moved, sold my house here in Eagle Mountain and bought a house in Newport, and my realtor cheated me out of over $12,000. And I was to the point where I couldn't make the deal work, and I was looking at having to rent a room and let my kids go live with their dad, because my realtor had promised over $12,000 worth of stuff to the buyer of my house and the seller of the new house, and I couldn't, it wasn't even gonna work anymore. So
Yeah.
her broker had to get involved and make her give some information to make the deal work, and then she got fired.
Oh
She
man,
did so many illegal things.
dang. Yeah, that's tough. I'm sorry that you had that experience, but also good to learn from, and that'll be fresh. That'll never leave your mind. And that's obviously not the type of service that you want to provide, right? So yeah, there's a lot of ways to make a win-lose situation, but a lot of times it's because people are pressured. Pressure oftentimes gets people to do things that are not necessarily the best for them, that they regret later. So as an agent, to me, there is a difference in pressure versus persistence. What comes to mind when you think of the difference of those two words as a salesperson? Pressure and persistence.
Like pressure is walking, it's like a
Here, I think we have another mic. Then you guys don't have to share.
Yeah, I think that pressure is like, when you walk into like a used car lot.
Yeah, that's a stereotype, right?
There's a sense in that you feel it in there.
Mhm.
Persistence, like, is due diligence. And you're serving, there's no
Yes.
weight to it, being persistent.
Yeah, I like that. The way I say it is it's the same message, and that is that to me, pressure is caring more about me, persistence is caring more about you. Meaning, if I know that based on the market or based on, could be a lot of different things, maybe was their goals that they said that they wanted to accomplish, we can be a little more persistent in saying, hey, this is what that gets you, right? But pressure is like, I need a paycheck, I'm hungry, so you better hurry and sell your house because that's what you need to do, right? And that's what you said about the used car salesman. That's the stereotype with the used car salesman, right? They don't care what car you get. They don't care if it's a junk car or not. They just want you to buy it. Obviously, that's not true for every salesperson in cars, but that's the stereotype. And that's what we definitely don't want to be, because what happens? Do you think you'll get that deal? Sometimes you do. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you're in the middle of the contract and maybe it's too late for them to back out without severe consequences. And so they may decide to just finish it out. But then what happens to your relationship with them? It's gone. Then you remember them, right? But not in a good way. Yeah. Oh man. It's tough. Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. And that's unfortunately what happens both on the professional side as well as it can happen on a personal level too. With your relationship can be very damaged.
The other day I was out knocking doors and
Yeah.
doing smoke rooms, and I talked to somebody and like, how long your house? And anyway, she ended up saying, actually, we really want to move. We're going here in this neighborhood. I
Mm.
would love to have you help me. We exchanged information, everything.
Oh, awesome.
And then, for a few days, we were texting back and forth. But as soon as I tried to, I used one of the tactics I've learned here. So is Monday or Tuesday better for you to meet?
Yeah.
Then she.
The option
She
close.
has not responded since.
Ah,
And I don't normally use that much pressure.
yeah,
And I feel like I normally have a lot more success and people want to work with me because I don't pressure.
sure.
As soon as I did pressure, I lost her.
That's a really good
So,
point.
let's go with that.
Yeah. So I teach another class called spin selling, and spin selling is it's a sales model based off of years and decades of research, um, ultimately headed by a guy named Neil Rackham, who wrote the book. But what he talks about there is that there is a difference between small sales and large sales. I don't know if we talked about this last time. Okay, good. So this is like one of the most critical things to understand in our industry. And you tell me which one is more applicable to real estate as an agent trying to gain business from a potential buyer or seller, if it's a small sale or large sale. Small sales are generally decisions that are made on the spot that don't bear a lot of consequence if they get it wrong. Large sales are generally ones that take them some time to really think about, and maybe days of research. Could also take multiple sales calls, so to speak, so multiple types of presentations. And ultimately, if they do get it wrong, there can be pretty severe consequences. So which do you feel like is more applicable to real estate agents? Are we small sales or are we large sales? You think large? Jake, what do you think?
Large sales.
Alicia, would you agree with them?
Yeah,
Well, absolutely. I do too. And what he said was 90% of sales books are written for small sales, and they can work. And I know, coming from experience of door to door, that was a small sale. Again, people, I would talk to them for 20 or 30 minutes. It's the first time they met me, but I'd get them to give me their credit card and their social security number, right? Like, and I know you had that same experience. Yeah. And then again, never hear from them or speak to them ever again, right? That was what I did. That was a small sale, because if they got that wrong, yeah, it's inconvenient, but it's not like their whole life is ruined because they chose a bad TV service or something, right? For most people, there are a few exceptions out there. But for us, what we're doing, if they get it wrong, I mean, it's funny that you'd mentioned this, Jenna, that of your experience with your friend, like, there are severe consequences. This is not something that's just going to go away by tomorrow. Like, your relationship has severely been damaged, and it's not to say that it'll never be repaired, but if it is, it's going to take some work and a lot of things. And so I've had those types of experiences in my own career, both good and bad, right? That have enhanced my relationship with people, but then others that have been damaged that are not the same today as they were in the past. That's the reality. So yes, this is a very big deal. And the important thing to remember, and the reason why there is that distinction, is because he said that the tactics that work for small sales are the exact things that don't work in large sales. Pressure is one of those. There were times where I admittedly had put pressure on people to buy what I had. Now, yeah, those things about how we're only in the neighborhood today, we're giving free installation today, when in all reality, like, we always have free installation. Like, it's not a charge. But to say, hey, it's a weekend only special, those are pressure type things to get you to act right away. Now, I'm not saying we should never do those kinds of things, but when it comes to people working with us, those tactics generally will turn off a buyer or a seller from us if we're pressured. So with that background in play, if you felt like that pressure, that question, I don't think it's a bad question. It's Monday or Tuesday work better for you to meet, because again, you may be showing persistence or you may be showing pressure, but what's the difference?
One is that you care. One is that you're coming from a place of genuine care about this situation.
Yeah.
The other is, I need to pay my bills. Let's get this transaction.
Right. Now, as a new agent, having been one myself, I understand, and then maybe this is not everybody's situation, but if this is your situation, I would highly recommend that you do all that you can to not worry about the commission. It's so hard when you need the money, for sure, but you have to be able to detach yourself from that outcome, because if you don't, that filter will be there of, I need my money, so I'm going to tell you things that are in your best interest, maybe, but I'm going to get paid, so hopefully it works out, right? But otherwise, it's telling people, hey, you know what? Now is not a good time to sell for you when it's the right situation. Now, I had this happen just 2 months ago. We dove into the numbers. They were on board. They literally would have gone, I could have sold their home by now had they decided to sell their home. But after our discussion and what their goals are, this was an investment property that they had. We all kind of decided, and I frankly told them, if I were you, I wouldn't sell yet. I would hold on to that a little bit longer. It could. For their particular situation, they would have had to pay capital gains tax. They would have had to do a couple other things, but they would have done it had I told them that they should have. Like, that's how much trust they have in me. And I was grateful for that. And I could have abused it, right? But no, I'm not going to, that's not how I run my business. Lo and behold, 2 weeks later, get a call from them saying, hey, my parents are looking to buy. Can you help them? Would that have happened had I? Probably not, right? Maybe I could have gotten their one sale, but they would have realized maybe, or had regret, or something would happen that they would have been like, you know what? I'm going to look for somebody else next time, right? That's not the type of relationship that I want. And they told me by the end of that how grateful they were that I told them what I that they felt that I had their best interest at heart. There's no question who they're going to work with when the time is right for them. Like, that relationship was greatly enhanced, even though it did not result in this deal yet. But I know it will, and many more. It did actually for their parents who've by now bought. So it's great. But yeah, that's overall, that's what we have to have, is that heart for them, not heart for us. And here's the thing, this is one of my life mottos that actually was told to me by one of my great mentors in the door-to-door space, who I still am close friends with. He said that money follows value. So if you can focus on first providing value, true, genuine value for them, you're going to get paid. It's going to happen. But if you focus on the money, yeah, you still might get paid sometimes, but you can't grow a sustainable long-term business off of that model, doing what's right for you only and not for them.
Another experience with this.
Yeah, let's hear it.
I'm working on this development deal, and the developer I have no contract. I just have his word. I'm going to get 3% if I bring an investor.
Sure.
And then I'm asking more questions. He's like, well, we'll give you 1.5%, and then we'll get the investor to give you 1.5% at closing.
Sure.
And I said, well, I don't think they're going to want to do that.
Yeah.
And so I'm talking to people, like, do I just go to 1.5% and get different answers? And I talked to the developer on the phone, and he said, are you worried about commission? I'm like, well, also I made a huge mistake. He sent me all the info in an email, and he's like, just forward it to your investors. So then I can cut out a deal. So
yeah, 100%.
I did not realize it. I was late at night. I've never done anything like this before. I just forwarded it to like 25 investors. It has his info on it. Mine's not on it. I have no contracts. I probably just cut myself out of this deal. It's a huge mistake. And so, I guess, and then I'm talking to him on the phone. I'm like, how do I not be cut out of this deal?
Yeah.
Because I just made this big mistake. And he's like, well, maybe you're just after the commission. And I'm like,
well, clearly you want to get paid.
gosh.
Yeah.
I mean, how do I handle that? Because you're saying, don't let it be about the commission, and it's not
Yeah.
all about the commission, but part of it is, no?
I appreciate you bringing that up, because I guess my point is not so much be willing to just erase your commission, give it all away all the time. Like, that's not what I mean. I just mean if your intentions of getting them to do something is based off of the outcome for you, then that's when it's not okay. But if they are going to do it and that is the right thing for them, yeah, you deserve to get paid 100%. So you definitely should fight for your commission in that way and negotiate. That's what we're talking about today, right? But you have to protect yourself, and that's a really good example of how we should be protecting ourselves, is because, yeah, if you are the middleman or middlewoman, if that's a thing, we want to make sure that you're protected as well. So yeah, that's a tough one in that situation. Is that so? The investor would be the buyer, essentially. So you could have a buyer broker agreement, I'm assuming, with them that would state that you will get.
Yeah, I can have a buyer broker agreement, but I can't do a listing, like exclusive listing agreement, because they don't.
With the
work
developer?
out with
Yeah.
So it's the thing is, all the things I'm learning here and all the things I've experienced in the past in real estate don't necessarily apply. It's a little bit tweaked and different.
Yeah.
And it's so
To that deal, you mean? To that transaction? Yeah. it's not something I have experience with, to be honest with you. Yeah, so I'm not sure. Yeah, but it's good to go through that. And here's the funny thing about real estate. Like I've been involved with 150 transactions, and I can tell you every single one of them is different. Every single one of them, I've learned something new. And so, you definitely learn as you go, as well as learn from other people like you guys are doing now. But just know that this is a lifelong learning experience too, especially because as the market changes, our process has to change too, and certain things have to change. So you'll always be learning new things. And that's partly what I love about it, is that you got to be constantly up to date. The realtor that's been in it for 30 years, that's doing the same things that they were 30 years ago, exactly the same, is not doing as well because it's a different market, right? But the ones that have done it for that long, but they've adapted as they go, are the ones that do well. So yeah, I wish I could comment more on that situation, but yeah, definitely fight for your commission. I'm not saying that we should just give it away, but don't make that your focus. And that's why I like the phrase "money follows value," because you will get paid if you do things right.
I feel like that attitude lives inside of us even before we leave our home. How we're going to approach our people. Or how
Absolutely. Yeah. And I have seen that happen in this office, where we have so many willing and able agents who are willing to share, willing to give. You knock on anybody's door and they're willing to give you what they have, nothing held back. That attitude is there for me, where they don't necessarily get paid because I just answered somebody else's question, but in some way or another, it'll come back to you. Whether that means that you have more opportunities here within the office to grow, or somehow, whether you believe in karma, whether you believe in reap what you sow, whatever you believe in, the more good you put out there, the better chance you have of getting paid for that.
Yeah, and the approach I'm taking is that this is such a crazy big deal, and I'm so new that I'm trying to talk to as many experienced agents as I can. So I've got Dean, I've got Clay Winder, I've got Susie Love, and I'm like, trying to reach out to anybody.
Smart.
Because Susie does investing.
Yeah, she does.
A lot, and so
Should be a good one.
Been really helpful. But I'm like,
Good.
I kind of talked to
Yeah, and that's what it is. So the red book, if you guys have not read The Millionaire Real Estate Agent, MREA, awesome. 100% the hands down the best book that any agent should get and read and study. I just reread it again. I guess it's now been last summer. It's almost a year ago. Feels like just barely. But in there, he talks about how we don't need to reinvent the wheel, but that doesn't mean that we can't put our own spin on it. But one of the most frequent mistakes Gary Keller sees in agents is that they'll come up with their system and their process first, and then tweak it as they go. And what he recommends is follow the model first, and then tweak it as you go, because you're going to shave years and years of learning off of doing it that way. And that doesn't mean you can't put your own little touch to it, but that way you're off to a really good start. You have a really good foundation of what that process is. And that could be reaching out to people. That could be, calling, how to go about dealing with your SOI and how to stay in touch, the 36 touch program, the 201 club type stuff. Like those are the models that we need to be following, and then do it in your own way after. So yeah, great point. Okay, well, we've talked a little bit about some of these things. I think we'll continue with this and understand that in any negotiation, this is not just, hey, I'm a buyer, I want to buy your house, here's my offer. This is also, hey, I'm an agent, here's my offer. What is our offer to a potential seller, for example? If we're trying to get their business, what is our offer? Okay, yeah, our service is part of it. What else does it include? Yeah, did you go to that class
guidance
yesterday?
throughout the process.
Our process. Yep. So our process, our service that we provide. What are some of the elements of any offer? There's always numbers, right? What kind of numbers? Yeah. The commission. Mhm. So when we're specifically for sellers, because that's when the commission is generally set. That's when we're negotiating our own commission, right? Clay Winder, I don't know if he said this yesterday, but I took that class a few years ago from him. One thing I remember he said was, if to a seller that's opposing your 3% commission, he says something along the lines of, well, if I can't negotiate my own commission, how do you expect me to negotiate on your behalf for your sales price, right? Frankly, I've never used that, but that's awesome. Feel free to use it. Clay's used it. Yeah. No, but it's true. Like, I definitely have, I know my value, and so I know what my 3% gives them, and can stick to that, because I know what my process looks like, and I have that confidence. But yeah, that's kind of a funny one. I always remember he said that. Pretty bold, yeah.
That's totally something I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, you're like, okay. But you have to have built up to that too, right? Like, you can't just come out and say that's the first thing, right? You have to have your value built up. Yeah, it's true. But anyway, my point is we're negotiating in that point too, right? So let's talk. I'm glad we brought this up. Let's talk about that, because it's a little different than what we talked about last month for those that were here last month. So when we're talking about our commission, that 3%, how do we get that? How do you get a 3% commission from a seller? To prove your value? Yeah, absolutely. There's a chart. Maybe I'll do it on here. Yes. I'm gonna pull this over so Alicia can see it, hopefully.
Thank you.
Okay. This actually comes from Spin Selling. All right. You guys are going to see my amazing artistry at work here. Okay. This is a teeter-totter, right? One side's heavier than the other. You guys can see that. So far, am I doing okay? I don't know how the glare is, but here is where we may be, in some cases, this is an extremely difficult sell to a seller. So if you can't see this one says commission. This one says value. So what's wrong with this picture? Which one's heavier? And we're thinking of this as a seller's frame of mind. So this is how a seller sees what we've got. Value's
The
got to be
commission
heavier.
weighs down the value.
Yeah. In this situation, what does this mean? The seller feels like what? Yeah, you're way too expensive. 3% is a ridiculous amount. My home is a $500,000 home. 3% of that, 15 grand. Like, that's way too much money, right? Why? Why do they feel that way? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So if we can build more value, what we want them to feel is that 3% is what? That's a good deal. Yeah. That's nothing compared to the value that I'm getting from you, right? So we want to make sure that we flip this. So we stack more. Where's an eraser? I'm a visual learner, so I want to make sure I see this in a visual way. I'm going to just put 3% here. Oh my gosh. Let me do that again. %, and I'm going to just put value. Okay, done a bunch of different pieces of value that we're adding to them. Now, what are these? What specifically are these things? Jenna mentioned a couple, like staging could be one of them. It depends on what your process looks like. But you've got to have enough value to where they feel like a 3% is a good deal. Not even just fair, but I would say even a good deal. That would be even better. So as part of our presentation and during that listing consultation and all of that, we have to make sure that we are getting them to feel this way, that by the end, when we're ready to ask for them to sign the exclusive right to sell, and we ask for our commission at that point, that it's a no-brainer for them because of all the value that we've already built up. So the question is, how do you find out what is the value that we offer? We mentioned a couple pieces, but is that the same every time to every person? It's not. Why not?
Versus a home that we built in the 30s.
Okay, yeah. So different types of homes have different parts where you can provide value. That's true.
Well, like what my friend Mike values, my friend Hunter doesn't necessarily value.
Exactly.
it.
It's because Hunter's kind of a weird. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Yeah, 100%. Everybody's different. Their goals may be different. They may be moving because they got a new job somewhere and they don't care really about the home as much as they care to be there by June 1st, right? Maybe somebody else is like, you know what? I don't care how long it takes to sell. I want top dollar, or I want this specific amount. That may be their goal. So how do we find out what is valuable to them? Through asking lots and lots of questions. So again, as a plug, that's what spin selling talks about, is how to ask more effective questions so that we can bring this out of them, what Neil Rackham calls an explicit need, to where they say, I need a realtor who does this. I need an agent who can do this. Once they say that, that's when we present. That's when we can go to our value and say, well, this is what I offer. Oh, and it just so happens to align with exactly what you're looking for, right? Now, it's not made up, because our value, we have 1,000 different ways we can add value, but every buyer and seller is not looking for 1,000 ways. That they don't have 1,000 priorities, right? They have 2 or 3 things that really, really matter. So when we figure out what those things are, that's where we go in our presentation, is to kind of pick and choose, okay, based on what they told me, this is where I'm going to focus on my presentation. So my presentation, for example, if I were to tell you, go through all of my slides in my presentation and go in depth on every single one of them, it could take 2 or 3 hours to get through, right? But I don't take 2 or 3 hours to get through my presentation portion of my consultation with the seller. I take maybe 30, 45 minutes, right? Because I don't go in depth on everything. I only go in depth on the ones that matter most to them through my questions. So that's how you build that value, because otherwise, think of that imagery of the chart that we just did, and imagine boxes that have no weight to them. They're empty boxes. Maybe you have 1,000 empty boxes, but that commission is still too heavy because there's nothing in them for the client, right? So it doesn't matter to spend 10 minutes talking about a topic that maybe you do really well at it. Maybe it is amazing. Maybe your last client loved that so much, but this guy doesn't care about it, or this woman, that's not important to them. They don't mind, right? So yeah, that's a good way to do it. So with any negotiation, the person generally who wins is, and we talked about win-win a minute ago, but to make it a win-win, usually the person that knows more information about the situation is the one that can that is able to make it a win-win more than likely, right? Because if you don't know what's important to the other side, then how are you supposed to get them what they want? Can't.
Like I insurance.
Uh-huh.
It's question based. So you can't sell insurance without asking like a litany of questions.
Yeah.
Without feeling like you're interrogating.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? Like there's a really tightrope, and it's not like a short, pushy sell. Like we've got the installers here, they're ready, they're right around the corner.
Right.
It's like it's the opposite of that.
Mhm.
And you're just like,
Yeah. Now, while everyone is different and what they're looking for is different, there is sort of a limit to what those could be, right? So that's why with the way that I do my presentation, my questions is I have my presentation, what I would like to tell them if it matters to them. And I ask questions at the beginning based off of what I might want to tell them later to see if it matters to them, right? If they're not a numbers person, they don't really care about the numbers, then I'm not going to focus on the numbers in my presentation, right?
See,
Exactly. Yeah. Trying to just figure out what is it that they care about. And then that's where I focus my time in the presentation. So with spin selling, there are questions that we go through, but I hesitate to get just a full list of questions. What I like to do is and I'll share this, I can share this with you, but I call it my consultation form, to where I have 6 different boxes of different topics that I want to cover in my questions. So that way it's not just let me ask you A to Z questions. These are the general topics that I want to ask you about, and I'll ask questions that way. It also, what I've found is it helps me focus on listening better, because that way I'm not worried about, okay, I've asked question number 1, now let me go ask you question number 2. I ask question number 1, and then that leads me to whatever the next question is, right? So I can be jumping kind of all over, but by the end of my consultation, I've got my page filled out of these are the different topics we've covered, but the conversation is so much more natural that way, and it's easier to get them engaged, and it does not feel robotic at all. But the end result is, to me, well, you could say the same if they were to fill out this form answering my 100 questions, but it's more of a conversation. So yeah, I'd be happy to share that with you. So yeah, so with any negotiation, there could be an acceptance, there could be a rejection, and then there could be, let's talk about this a little bit more, right? Counter offers and stuff like that. The most common way is when a buyer sends a seller an agreement or a contract, but we do this too with our agreements, with our buyer broker agreement and our exclusive right to sell agreement. We may be negotiating a little bit within that. And negotiating does not always mean lower commission, right? Just like we showed here, negotiating could just mean adding more value, or at least expressing more value or helping them understand more value. That could be negotiating, right? So very important to ask questions and to know the other side's intentions, to know what they're looking for. Otherwise, it's a shot in the dark. You might get lucky, but you probably won't, right? So, okay. Now, who do we negotiate with? Who do we negotiate with in real estate? The other agent. That's the voice. But through the other agent, we're actually negotiating with the seller. And if you really think about it, we aren't negotiating. We are the voice for our buyer or seller who negotiates through us and through the other realtor to negotiate with them. Like, why do we do that? What are some of the benefits to having that separation?
Real estate deals can get really.
Yeah.
Having, the buyer and the seller talking to each other face to face, knowing this person's going to live in my house, what am I going to do with it? But,
Yeah.
House problem. So you take it, make it less personal.
Yep.
That easy to agents.
Absolutely. Yep, that's exactly right. We make it less personal, and we should be taking the emotion out of it. I shared a story with you guys last time about some experiences that I've had of someone not taking the emotion out of it. And that can be very damaging, right? Because generally speaking, if you're in a very high emotion, whether it's a good emotion or a bad emotion, the decision making that you have is not always the greatest. Would you agree with that? Is there any experience that comes to your mind in your life that may be true, where you may be emotional about something and you realize later? Yeah, both of you are laughing. Yes? Anyone want to share anything? I'm curious now. Yeah. You don't have to share, but yeah. You're totally fine. I'm sure you have personal experiences, whether it's with relationships or anything, right? Okay, there you go. Yeah, with emotions, right? So our decision making is not always the greatest. Can a home purchase be an emotional time for people, or a home sale? Almost every time, right? That's a big deal.
I guess. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
buy it. And then it's like, I'm happy that I did.
Yeah. So maybe you did get lucky in that situation.
And I'm lucky I still have a few, but yeah, at the time it was like.
It was an emotional
it
thing.
was total-
Well, my wife, I'll tell you a quick one. My wife and I took a vacation to Cabo a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago. Anyway, doesn't matter. About 3 years ago, 3 or 4. And we went to this place and we talked to this people about, later found out it was a timeshare, but the way they pitched it to us and the way we understood it at the time was nothing like a timeshare, because we could use not just that property, but any property in the world that they had, which was like hundreds of properties. And so anyway, we decided to go for it. We did it. Then we get home a couple weeks later, we're looking into, okay, well, where's our next trip going to be? And let's look at this and realize that no, we actually have to pay, in addition to what we already paid, we also have to pay for every time we go book it somewhere. And when we compared those prices to like Hotwire or hotels.com, these were actually more expensive. And so we're like, this is a scam. This is horrible, right? But we were so emotional about it, and it was so beautiful. And being there in Mexico, we love Mexico. But yeah, like that was a very emotional decision for us that we didn't logically think through all the different possibilities until after. Luckily for us, we were able to get out of it. But that was one example, right? Just because we were in it. Had we had let's just say, for example, a travel agent, that's their job, is that they know about all these different things. They don't have that emotion. Maybe they could have said, you know what, this is not a good fit for you. This is not what you're thinking it is, but here's some other options that maybe you would like, right? That would have been great, but we didn't have that. So that's what we do though, as agents. We are the ones, we are the North Star for them. We are helping them with this process. And that's why also our consultations are so important, to figure out what their priorities are, to write those down somewhere that you know, okay, we're about to go show these homes to them. Let me review what was their preferences. What did they care about the most? What is most important to them? Because what happens, you'll see this, they'll go through the house and oftentimes they'll be like, oh, this house is so beautiful. And you'll be like, yeah, but it doesn't have a backyard. And you told me that how important that was. Yeah, but the kitchen's so nice. Yeah, that's true. So you're not necessarily talking them out of it, but you're just reminding them, hey, this is what we talked about before. Maybe your preferences have changed. If so, that's great. Maybe they haven't though, and you just are falling in love with a beautiful kitchen, but really that's not going to be what you want, right? And so you got to figure out what their priorities are.
Thought of an example.
Oh, okay, let's hear it. Okay.
And shared with my neighbors, they kept saying, oh, we can't afford to pay our half, and our son has been in the hospital over and over this year, all the surgeries and blah blah blah, and so we're just not going to do it. And I'm like, oh, I'll just pay it for you.
Yeah.
And then 2 years later, I'm gone. I lost all that money.
Yeah.
And they weren't super nice to me after that.
Oh, really? Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So emotions can definitely cloud our minds of what our logical brain wants to think, right? Or how it should be. So that is our job. So with that said, do agents ever get emotional? Definitely do. But I think that as much as we can avoid that, we should, because we won't be making necessarily the best choices on behalf of our clients. And that's one of our fiduciary duties. It's not explicitly in there, but to me, taking emotion out of it is part of our fiduciary duties, because I don't see a way where I can get emotional about a deal that it's going on and still fully have their best interest at heart. I don't know if that can happen.
So what are some ways to, if I do feel emotional, and I'm an emotional person.
Sure.
So if I do feel emotional and I'm in the middle of a deal and I'm the one who needs to take the emotion out of it.
Yeah.
What are some things I can do to, stop
To take that away.
Yeah, to take out the emotion.
Yeah, and it can be tricky because you care about these people, right? They're friends, their family. You know what their goals are. You're intimately involved in their lives at this point, to where you're probably aware of their financial situation, at least to some degree. You're aware of why they're moving, which is a big deal. And so, yeah, you care for these people, and it is hard sometimes to not get emotional about it. I think for me, the things that I've done that have helped the most is, number one, is to write down their priorities before this process. So again, in the listing consultation or the buyer's presentation, writing down what is it that matters to them and having that somewhere where you can review that and be aware of that at all times. Because then when there is an emotional thing happening and the seller gets mad because they thought you said that, you know, whatever the situation is, you can at least take a step back and be like, well, are their goals being met? And yes, it's inconvenient that now they're going to have to repaint the kitchen, but you know what? Their goals are still being met. And maybe there's a way that I can contribute to help them. It doesn't mean you have to pay for it, but maybe you can connect them to a good painter or find some way to still be involved and help them without taking that emotion.
There's a really cool book that you probably already heard of.
Hmm.
And it just teaches skills, like skill sets.
Yeah.
If you're involved in a sales background, and you're in the heat of it and like
Yeah.
emotions are running, it's challenging to like level out and like
Totally.
take a step back, take a walk around,
Yes.
walk, and not do.
Yep.
Mellow out.
100%. Don't send the first text. You can write it out. Honestly, some people have done it where they'll write it out. They feel better about it. And then they're like, okay, yeah. So definitely don't make that call. Don't send that email or send that text when you are feeling rage or when you're feeling that emotion, right? Just take a minute to cool off and figure out the facts. Okay, what are the facts? And kind of try and play it neutral. Yeah, it sounds like a good book. If you guys have heard of Ryan Holiday, he's an author that he studied Stoicism a lot. And that's been a lot of fun diving into some of his books. And Ryan Holiday, yeah, he's got a bunch of books on stillness is the key and ego is the enemy. There's a lot of good ones, but yeah, just kind of taking the emotion out of it, whatever you've got to do, because it's not a good place for negotiating. Now, when you are negotiating against somebody that is feeling that way, and you can tell because they're making it obvious, just know first and foremost, you've got the upper hand already. The fact that they're emotional and you're not means that you've got the upper hand. So if you can play it right, then you may be able to make it work for your client, right? So, yeah. Stuff. It's life too, right? I mean, I'm sure I'll had arguments with people that if we afterwards would have been like, you know what, that actually wasn't that big a deal, but I was just mad, right? That if you just maybe waited a minute and cooled off, then had a conversation, it would have had a totally different outcome. There you go. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe having that some sort of partner, whether it's a spouse or a friend that you can talk to and just be like, man, this guy is an idiot. What is he thinking? And talk through it. Then after you get through it, you're like, all right, now I'm good, right? But you don't have to tell them that. So I don't know, whatever you got to do, but take the emotion out of it is critical. Now, we can also, to an extent, try and help our clients take the emotion out of it too by guiding them in some of these things. And again, reminding of their priorities, like, look, I understand that's really frustrating. They did this, but just remember at the end of the day, you're still getting X, Y, and Z that you told me was so important to you. Do you feel like this is a situation that totally derails this deal for you? Or is this something that despite the inconvenience that it's caused, and because you can still accomplish these three main goals, do you feel like it's still something you want to move forward with? So kind of rephrasing it that way to validate them and say, yes, it is frustrating. It is annoying that this happened. They shouldn't have done that or whatever, because you don't, like, obviously the worst thing that you could do is just be like, well, you're dumb. Like, it's not a big deal. Just don't worry about it. Like, forget it. No, we want to validate, but still remind them of what matters most.
Like, you know, it's like you don't go shopping when you're hungry.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's like you told me initially when you had a full belly, this is what you wanted.
Yeah.
So I know this is so exciting right now. This kitchen is back, but you said you wanted a big backyard.
Yeah.
So you're really there to kind of bring them back to ground level as well.
Right.
With what they really truly want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, it is a reality that their preferences do change sometimes, And I tell them that in this consultation. I've been to so many buyers who say, this is what matters to me. And then as we see 2, 3, 4 homes, they start to say, you know what? That's actually not as important as this. I've realized now that we're actually in the homes, I care more about this. And that's totally fine. That's going to happen. And so that's why reminding them of their preferences when they get emotional could also teach you, hey, you know what? It sounds like this actually is a little bit bigger deal to you. Is that fair to say that this maybe is more important than what you told me before? And that might be true, maybe. Or maybe they're like, you know what? No, it's not. So yeah, emotion. It's a fun one to talk about. We all get emotional. It's hard not to. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Run and it's, yes.
Yep, exactly.
There's those experiences for you.
Fail forward. Yep. Good outlook. Okay. Awesome. So here's some of the most common points of a negotiation. Now we're actually going to talk about Rep C. Okay. We're talking about putting an offer in for a client or receiving an offer from a buyer. So the number one most often is number one term that matters to most sellers. Price and buyers, I should say. Yeah, most often it's that. But again, it's not always the case. The only way to find out if it's true for them is the questions that you ask. So I'm okay with assuming that that's their most important thing to the extent that I ask them the questions about it. So in other words, before I get to my listing presentation, I'm going to assume that they care most about price. So I'm prepared to talk about price, but because I assume that, I'm going to first ask them to say how much price matters to them. And you can do it in a lot of different ways. You can ask lots of different kinds of questions about it, but maybe even one of them is, if you had to choose between moving in by June 1st or getting $575 for your house, which one do you feel like would matter more to you? Right? So kind of pit a couple of their top priorities against each other to figure out what is the order. Maybe there's not, maybe there's two that are, I absolutely need this and I absolutely need this. There's no wiggle room here, but maybe there's other parts that are more negotiable. So that's important for you to know on behalf of your seller and your buyer, because then when you go to negotiate, when you have the conversation with the other agent, you know what terms are a little more flexible than others. Why could that be helpful to know? Yeah, there may be options to accommodate both sides to create a win-win. Maybe there's some terms on the other side that they're looking for that might be the lower priority ones for you. And you're like, okay, well, yeah, we'll be flexible here because then we can definitely get this price that matters most to my clients, or this date, or waiving a deadline, or whatever it might be, whatever it is that's most important for them. So yeah, the price and then the terms. What terms are there in a contract? Rep C. Okay, so that'd be more for the loan, right? Specifically in the Rep C, when we're talking about a real estate purchase contract, when a buyer sends it in, what terms are there that could be negotiated by the buyer and seller?
Deadlines.
Deadlines, yeah. What deadlines we have? We have seller's disclosure deadline, we have due diligence deadline, financing appraisal deadline, and settlement deadline. Do those ever matter to a buyer or seller, really? Absolutely. Yeah. Each one of those has a specific purpose, and each one of them could have a potential impact on what their goals are and if that's meeting their goals or not. What else? We already talked about price, talked about deadlines. Jake mentioned terms. Commissions could be, yeah, could be. Jake mentioned terms, maybe like the type of loan. That could be one, whether it's cash, conventional, the FHA. That could be a term that needs to be agreed upon. Home warranty is another one. Earnest money, the amount of earnest money that they're giving, right? Contingencies like the due diligence and not just the deadline, but also does the earnest money become non-refundable after due diligence or not till financing and appraisal? Like when does that happen? Exclusions and inclusions is a big one. Sometimes the seller does not want to give away that fridge, but the buyer absolutely wants that fridge. That could be one that they want to negotiate. The shed in the backyard. Here's one. I'm just telling you guys, sometimes jumping a little bit because I've had experiences with these. So when I talk about these things, it's fresh in my mind. I don't think we talked about the shed situation last time, did we? Maybe not, but
No.
either way, good to remember. Okay. So I had a buyer, or I had a seller, we're selling their house, and they told me that the south shed was going to stay with the property. The north shed they were going to take with them. Well, when I put it on the MLS, I flipped it by accident. And the buyer sends in their offer, and since they copied and pasted the inclusions, they asked for the north shed when my seller wanted to give up the south shed. Well, nobody noticed anything until after my seller moved out. New buyer moves in and says, hey, this is the wrong shed. They were expecting the newer shed to stay, not the old rickety, beaten down shed, right? So whose fault was that? 100% my fault. And there was twice that I could have avoided it. Number one, and initially writing it down on the MLS, that would have fixed it right then and there. But I also should have noticed when they wrote in their offer, this is the shed that they wanted, and gone over that with the sellers. Did the sellers look at the offer and sign it? Yeah, they could have caught it as well, but I don't see that as their fault at all. That's what they hire me for, is to help them avoid those kinds of mistakes. So what did I do? Everyone might have a different philosophy on this. My philosophy was it was my mistake, so I'm going to pay for my education. So I bought her a new shed. Yeah, that's how I view it. Because also I can promise you this, that has never happened again with any type of inclusions, exclusions. I actually have a sheet that I made that says these are the most common exclusions and inclusions. I want you as a seller to circle the ones that you were keeping with you to make sure that I put that properly in the listing. Like, those are a couple things that I do now to avoid that type of a mistake from happening again. Right? Yeah, I'd be happy to send it to you. So that's, yeah, but that could be that could get you in trouble a little bit.
It's such a simple mistake, but
Yeah, it was literally one word, right? But the buyer expected one thing, the seller expected one thing, and they were just different because I didn't do my job properly. So, but yeah, that's one of the terms that can be negotiated in a contract, is different things. So when you have a buyer that absolutely needs a certain price and you have a seller that is not willing to negotiate any price difference, there could be all these other terms that you might be able to figure something out with. Maybe you can't be flexible on the price as a buyer, so maybe the seller can come down on their price. Maybe there's other terms that you can do to give them what they want as well. So in other words, you could ask them to, maybe if a buyer really, really wants a property, some of the ways that you can make their offer stronger is by, first of all, making a call to the listing agent 100% of the time to find out what matters to the seller. Because are they going to tell you? Yeah, they want the deal to happen their way. If they, as a seller's agent, can say, hey, we got an offer exactly what you want, I mean, they're going to think well of that agent, right? And so they want that to happen. So if you ask them, they should be able to tell you what matters most to the seller. Then on the buyer side, if we can match what they're looking for, that gives you the best chance of getting an offer accepted. But in addition, you could even go above and beyond on certain things if your client is willing and you have that conversation with them. I mean, there's lots of different ways, but one of them could be that you have the earnest money become non-refundable maybe after due diligence instead of financing appraisal, or that you just tighten up those deadlines so that it's only 10 days or 7 days for due diligence instead of 2 weeks, to give the seller confidence that you're going to be moving forward quickly. That could be important to them. A lease back is one of them. You're familiar with the lease back? So lease back is where the seller stays in the property after closing for up to 2 months, although it could be more, up to 2 months, and basically pays rent to the buyer. So the buyer just has to wait 2 months to move in, or it could be 2 weeks or whatever time period. But that could be a really helpful tool, because a lot of times a seller needs to find a property to move into, or they can't move quite yet. but they do want to close. So that way they get their money and it's closed, but then they don't have to buy the next one yet. They have some time to work with. So that's one of the most useful tools. And it could also help a buyer too, where maybe a buyer, their lease doesn't end until next month, or maybe they're selling a house and they need extra time. Yeah, a residential leaseback agreement. So it's in one of the MLS forms on the utahrealestate.com. So it's basically like a buyer's renting or a seller's renting what is no longer their house for an extra period of time. Now, if the buyer's, yeah, it gives them more time to stay there, then they a lot of times can avoid moving twice. They don't have to move out of their home, live in a rental for a month, and then move into the next home. Yeah, exactly. Mhm. Oh, really? There you go. Yeah. Yeah, which is just, it's inconvenient, right? Because you can't move in, you got all your stuff, but you had to move out. So it can be kind of hard. So yeah, giving that lease back could give them that option of just one simple move. And that can mean more than $2,000 more on their purchase price, because hey, they don't have to pay $2,000 elsewhere. And oftentimes a buyer will allow them to do it for free. I mean, this is all negotiable. You could do it at the going rate for what the rental is for that type of a home. But a lot of times a buyer will say, hey, I don't have a mortgage payment anyway on my first month, so I'm going to pass that along to you and have you not pay rent for the first month. And that way we can reduce the price a little bit to where it's more comfortable for me, right? So those are all things that you can do that can help the negotiation. But if it's a conventional or an FHA loan that is going to be their primary residence, so the buyer's buying it, that's why it's up to 60 days, because it doesn't let you do more. The loans, because you're going to be making it your primary residence, they want to see you actually move into the house. So they give you up to 2 months to do that. But if it's a cash offer, that they could do whatever they want. They could let them stay there for 6 more months and rent it out or whatever. So there's some rules about that, but that's a really, really helpful tool to help in a situation, because it comes up, not every time, but I would say that, I don't know, at least half of the time, there's some sort of either a leaseback or extra possession days negotiated to where the seller doesn't have to move until after it's closed, right? Because to have a seller move and then, oh, looks like he needs to get in. Oh, he already ran away. He'll come back around. To have a seller move twice is really inconvenient. So that's why it comes up a lot. But to have them move out before closing can be risky too, because then what if it doesn't close and now they're out of the house and it's going to be another month before they can get it sold to someone else. So that's why it's really nice to have it happen after. Okay. Any ahas so far of stuff that we've talked about? Been helpful? Okay.
The emotion. I think that's you just
Yeah.
figuring out how to take the emotion out of it.
Yeah, and I'm not an expert in that regard. I know that that's what we need to do, but the how to get rid of the emotion, I'm not always the expert in. But
Well, I think what I wrote down is, from the beginning, write down their motivation, refer back to that.
Yeah.
Remember, this is why you're doing this, and then don't send email or text when you're upset. Get back to the facts and vent to a friend.
Yeah.
And then validate. I understand it's frustrating for you, but at the end of the day, you're gonna get agency.
Yeah.
I think those are like.
that's really helpful. Good. I'm glad. No, you're welcome. I'm glad it's helped.
I was gonna say just the fact that, well, I didn't really think about that. You know, you have a list of sort of, these are my standards for what I want. But then I get into this home and, oh, I just love the dining area.
Yeah.
So this just goes out the window.
Right.
Where it's like, it's our responsibility to ground them back down and say, hey, look, this is a fantastic dining room, but you said this.
Right. Doesn't quite fit that.
That's
Yeah. Yeah. And I've had at times where people have gone in there and they're like, you know what, I know this is not what we told you we wanted, but it feels right. Can't really argue with that. But at least you did your job in saying, hey, let me remind you of this. And even despite this, you can go forward with it and you want to, or the opposite. This has everything you want and you don't feel right about it, and you, for whatever reason.
Like it's playing and natural. In your brain, like, 'cause I'm just, it's just this adding like value either way you look at it.
Yeah,
'Cause
totally.
You're adding value because you're reminding them, then they're excited. So it's just
Yeah.
same thing.
Uh-huh. Yeah, what's funny too is when you go with a husband and a wife to see homes, you'll see this all the time where one of them will be the more emotional, excited one. The other one will be a little bit more like neutral, like, yeah, that's nice. "Oh, okay, that's good." But deep down, they may be really excited too. But they feel like one of them's got to be that control and be like, yeah, exactly. You don't see what's going on underneath, right? Yeah. So it's kind of fun. All right. 3 P's of negotiation: prepare, present, and position. So when it comes to preparing, we have to know our goal. And again, this depends on what type of situation we're talking about. If we're talking about gaining a client for a potential buyer or seller, what is our goal? Ultimately, to maybe obviously work with them, but also get a certain commission. Those are maybe 2 of our goals, right? If we're representing our client in a transaction, what is our goal? Basically, whatever our client's goal was, right? We just kind of pass that along and create a win-win. So we can only do that by knowing them, and that's why the preparation is key. I always recommend having a consultation with a potential buyer or seller for the earliest part as you can, even if they're a friend or a family member that say, yeah, I'm totally working with you, let's do it. I still think, in fact, I think it's even more important in those situations to have a really good conversation with them, because again, speaking from personal experience, both good times and bad times, having that conversation can really prevent a lot of negative things from happening later on.
You're saying
During a presentation, yeah. Yeah, they've got to know what your process looks like, and you've got to know what their motivations are. And having like that meeting where you sit down and you talk about it, and it's not just this casual like, yeah, we went to lunch and yeah, I really want this, where they're really honed in and saying, this is what we want. And you can dive deep into that and ask more questions about it, to why that matters to them and how that affects their life in a good way if they get it, and a bad way if they don't. That's the conversation that needs to be had. And I feel like, especially when you're working with family and friends, the communication has to be that much better in order to maintain and enhance your relationship with that person, as opposed to damage. We've all heard the term, don't mix family, or don't do business with family, right? You guys heard that before? Why do they say that? Because when problems happen, then what? Yeah. And word spreads and people know about it, and Thanksgiving dinner is not the same as it used to be. What's that? I don't. Oh, really? Yeah. Some internal family feuds going on. Yeah. So I'll say this too, since we're on the topic: getting things in writing is probably the single most important thing you can do when you're working with family and friends. I have an experience that I'll share with you. It was not a traditional deal. It was a deal that I kind of got paid. I got paid in a different way than normal, but basically, from the time that we had agreed upon what was going to happen, they were going to give me $5,000. Well, the deal closed a year later, and when it was time for them to pay me, I got a check for $2,000. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, when's the rest coming? You know, like, what's going to happen? So I called them up just to have that conversation and say, hey, thank you so much for the payment. Appreciate you sending that my way. Just curious, you know, when we should expect the rest, right? Kind of a hard conversation to have with your cousin, who you see. Yeah, he was my cousin. Well, he still is. That didn't change. He told me, that's not what we agreed on. I thought we said 2,000. And I genuinely feel like he thought that was true. I don't think he was purposefully trying to be dishonest. And maybe I'm the one that forgot. I don't know. But neither of us know. But the point is, we had a conversation a year later when it comes time to pay. he thought one way, I thought a different way. That's when problems can happen, right? Now, just because of my understanding of this thing and wanting, again, the relationship over the transaction type mentality, I just let it go. But it's still hard. And again, it's my learning lesson, but I will get things in writing, because if nothing else, that just avoids that conversation from happening. Like, we have it in writing. You remember, I remember, it's there. It is what it is. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. And if he had done it on purpose, in my mind, then it may be even worse. But luckily, we still have a good relationship. Although I think that's always kind of an elephant in the room, because it's still pretty fresh. It was only a year ago. Yeah. So it happened, right? But yeah, getting it in writing is important. Uh-huh. Yeah, 100%. 90% of my business comes from friends and family and referrals. But I love working with family, because on the other end, and that's not just, I've had multiple bad experiences with family. That one wasn't even the worst. There's been a couple others that were worse, that we do not have a relationship right now. And eventually I think we will, but even if we do, it's gonna be tough. And Dee knows about one of them specifically. Yeah, it gets a little tricky. But on the other side, and this is where I focus, and this is why I still work with family and friends, I've deepened my relationship with my siblings, with other friends that I've had, and other cousins that without this, we would have been more distant than we are right now. But now I get to be intimately involved in one of the biggest decisions of their life, and helping them build generational wealth. Like, I have 3 siblings that now own 2 properties that, like, I'm not saying it's because of me, but I don't think any of them would own 2 properties had I not helped them with this vision, right? And helping them. Yeah. So they still did all the work and everything, but like, I know that I've been a big part of that, and I know they see that too. So like, that's really cool. So that's why I want to work with friends and family, even though at the sacrifice that sometimes it may not go over well. And those are hard, but I'm trying to learn to avoid those situations. And again, the biggest lesson I've learned is to just get it in writing, so that there's no question. Both sides know what's going on, that when the time comes to pay, they know what that looks like, and you don't have to really even say anything about it.
It sounds to me like minimal pushback, just signing that paper, or is it?
Yeah. Oh, like in that moment, with an exclusive right to sell or buyer broker or something. Yeah, 100%. Because that value thing, when I've learned that, and I've been able to figure out what is valuable to them specifically, and then hammer that in, then by the end, it's like, sweet. Like, I've literally had family where, again, everyone's different on how they want to go about it. You guys decide what your process is like. I know some people, like, I don't give discounts ever. My personal thing is I'll give a 0.5% discount to like my closest family and friends. But I've done that a couple of times, to where I said, normally I do this is my process, is what we charge, but because you're my family, my sibling or whatever, I want to. And my sibling literally told me, no, like, I want to pay you the full thing, right? Part of that was because he's a nice guy, but I think a part of that too was because he saw the value that we provide, and it's like, no, like, that's worth it to me. So I think more often than not, that's kind of the mentality that people have toward the end, is that, like, I'm willing to pay that because I feel like what you have to offer is what's in my best interest. So yeah, if you're getting objections to your commission, there's only one reason for it, and that's because the value is not there in their mind. Not saying you don't have value, but they don't see it. So somehow in the presentation and the questions or what they're looking for, it did not come up to the point that they feel like it's there. But it could be, that's just a principle of life, right? Like, if I told you I have a car for $5,000, is that a good deal or not? If that's all you know. You don't know. It could be a brand new Tesla with nothing wrong with it. $5,000, guarantee you're going to find a way to make that happen, right? Even if you don't have the money today. But then if I told you this is a car that's 1999 Chevy Prism that doesn't even exist anymore, stick shift, by the way, maybe that adds some value. But it's beaten down, run down. Like $5,000 is a horrible deal, right? And that's because the value is not there. It's not the $5,000. It's not our 3% commission. That's not the issue. The issue is whether or not they see that value.
It's like sales experiences and you kick yourself like that should have technically gone through, but then it's like, what did you not do?
Yeah.
Oh, talk about this and this, but you weren't adding value. You were just,
Right.
you know, there was a guy that was out there not with us,
Mhm.
and he would be in the home for like 2 hours.
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
like,
Yep. Yeah, they had a great conversation with him. Yeah, but there was no value on the professional way where they felt like, yeah, we got to work with this. So, yeah, that's one of the biggest skills that we need to learn as agents is how to give a professional presentation. But it's not so much presenting as it is asking questions first. That's the most critical part. You can have the best presentation out there in the whole wide world, but they're not going to see that as much unless they know that you care about them and that you know them. Like you've all heard that saying, nobody cares how much you know unless they know how much you care. Like nobody cares how good of a presentation you have unless they can first feel that you have their best interest at heart. If they feel that and you have an awesome presentation, that's how you get a home run, right? But otherwise, you can't just have one without the other. You could also have really good questions and a really crappy presentation and service, and that's not good either.
this guy getting up, rubbed each other the wrong way, and so I literally sat there for the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then you have like somebody else where you're like, this guy is so rad, like
Right.
feels everything, like
Yeah. That's the other part too, is that they're going to remember how you made them feel. Have you guys ever heard the book How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie? Yeah, it's a great book. Before I read it, the title sounds very manipulative, right? But I guarantee you it is not. It is just how to be a good person and a good friend to people, how to make people feel good about themselves. And people like to talk about themselves. So if you notice that in the beginning, you're talking more than they are, they're probably not going to be feeling like this guy's awesome or this girl's awesome. They're probably going to be questioning things. But if you are allowing them the opportunity to talk good about themselves, people like that. They may not even realize and pinpoint it, but you may leave there and be like, that was awesome. You know, Jake's a good guy. You know, I like Jake, you know, even though you didn't say anything about yourself, you talked about them the whole time, right? Because that's how you make them feel. Yeah.
if I can say it, just 5 seconds to let them know I'm just listening.
Yeah. Yep. So asking good questions to allow them that opportunity. And it's not just where'd you grow up? Like, yeah, we can ask some of those, but mainly like, what did your last sale experience look like when you sold your home 5 years ago? What went really well? And dive deeper into those types of things that are applicable to real estate, but still allow them the opportunity to voice their opinion. Because I guarantee you, if we do it right, they haven't told all of these things to any one person ever. You're the one person that they can tell all of this to that really understands, because we're in the business. And so when they've had that type of an experience and they get to tell somebody that has experience in real estate about it, that means more to them because you get it. You know, you speak that same language. Okay. We've got 15 minutes left. You guys good with that? Okay. All right. So kind of going back to our negotiating here a little bit, but preparing beforehand, getting as much information as you can from the other side. Again, if you're representing a buyer, 100% of the time you should be asking the seller's agent before you write an offer, what matters most to the sellers? What would a perfect offer look like? You can ask whatever question you want, but getting more information about what they're wanting is going to help you. I think that's maybe obvious, but it's important. Yeah, 100% of the time. And it doesn't happen very often. You'd think that it should happen every single time, but it doesn't. Oftentimes you'll get an offer and you'll be like, oh, I didn't even know they were thinking about it because they didn't tell you. I don't want a seller's agent to ever not know an offer's coming from me, because we've had a conversation. I've already asked you, what is price more important to your sellers than dates, or is there a specific closing date that would be beneficial for your seller? Things like that. Right. Yep. You never speak to their client directly. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And here's the other thing. This is part of the story that I won't get into the story this time, but that we talked about last time, is that you'll remember these people that you're working with. And so if you have a really positive experience with that agent, by the time they come around again, you have a listing, they bring you a buyer or vice versa. Like you'll be like, oh yeah, like that would be cool to work with them again. Like we had a good experience last time. And I've had multiple like that where we've worked together now on multiple deals. But you'll also remember the bad times, the bad ones, and you'll be like, yeah, I'm going to remember you, right? So that the next time, and I had this happen recently where they sent in an offer. I remember who it was, and I didn't tell my sellers, this person's a horrible person. I didn't badmouth the person, right? I simply said, I have had a transaction with them and it wasn't smooth. That's kind of where I left it. And we had other offers, so they kind of went the other way. And I think that's fine, because my experience tells me that the same thing is going to happen again. Because even up to that point in sending the offer, there was already some friction. And so I'm like, yeah, I don't want to do this again. But if that offer was the best by far, and it wasn't the question, like, I'm not going to tell them don't go with that person. Like, I'll deal with it, but it, it can affect the transaction for sure. So, okay. We'll skip a couple of these. I'm going to go to present. Okay, so when we're presenting our offer, a couple key things to remember is if you're the one giving more information than receiving, you're probably not in the strongest negotiating position, right? The person that's speaking less and listening more is usually the one that can win. Why? Yeah. So let's think about a scenario. Let's say that you're representing a seller, and you know that, so what's today? May 19th. Let's say that they're going to list their house today, and they're buying a house that they have to move into by July 1st. So they've got let's just say it's 6 weeks that they have to sell the house before their next move, right? Do you tell that to the market? Probably not, right? Now, I will take a step back and say, ultimately, have this conversation with your seller, because they may want you to, but so you do whatever they are asking you to do as part of our fiduciary duties. What's that? Yeah. But that's the point. When you as a buyer or as an agent see that there's a listing that says seller's willing to negotiate right at the start, what does that tell you? Yes. Please send us an offer that's lower than what we're asking for. Right? And so when they say my seller has to move out by this date, and that date's coming up, and you're really close on that, most of the time you may get offers, but they're not going to be the price that you want. So again, that might matter more to the seller, though. They may not care. They may be willing to. And I just had this happen to where my seller, because of timing, was willing to accept an offer $20,000 less because it was a more solid offer, and it got them in the house sooner, right? And so for them, that mattered more. That may be your seller, but for most people, it probably won't. So you just have to have that conversation and ask them. So yeah, holding that information back. I did share this story last time, and I'm going to share it again because this is the power to me of holding information back. I had a listing in American Fork probably a year and a half ago that we put to the market. We had some interest on it, got a lot of activity, but we didn't have any offers in hand. So I had an agent text me, and they had a buyer that was interested in the property. So he was asking me, and he was just texting me. He said, and he asked me, do you have any offers? Now, what can I tell him? No, that's okay. So I'm representing the seller. We had a lot of interest. We didn't have any offers on the table, but I had a buyer's agent ask me, do you have any offers on the table? What can I tell him?
What your client's okay with you disclosing?
Yes, Alicia, you hit it right on the head. I had this conversation with the seller and asked him, what would you like me to do in a situation where they ask me, because sometimes they'll ask you not only how many offers do you have, but they'll also maybe ask you, and what is the price of those offers? What do they look like, right? Ultimately, I can tell them whatever my seller wants me to tell them. So that's why it's important to have this conversation beforehand so that I know and I'm prepared. But from my experience, personally, I feel like it's best not to tell them anything other than we've had a lot of interest or something vague like that. And so having had that conversation with the seller, that's the way he wanted me to go. So I did. So he's texting me, how many offers do you have? And I said, I'm sorry, my seller hasn't authorized me to disclose that. But what I can say is that we've had a lot of interest, which was true. Well, he got pretty upset with me and said that I'm supposed to tell him, that I'm obligated to tell him, which is, Dean, that's not true, right? My sellers told me no. With offers. Sure. There you go. Yeah, that's a good one too. But it's still it's vague enough that, like, it's not super specific. Right. Oh yeah, sorry, Alicia, Dean's here. He's joined us.
What I would say is, don't have any offers on the table right now. But we've had such activity on accepting offers.
Yeah.
In time. Or I have had threats of offers.
That's perfect.
I would literally say I have threats.
Yeah, I like that. But if I had said no, that we don't have any offers, and that's kind of how I left it. Turns out this person did send in an offer, but guess what their offer was? It was a good offer. It was a good offer. We had it listed for 370 and they offered for 385. So it was $15,000 above what we had. That was the only offer that we got. So was my seller happy? Yes, they should have, which they did. They went for it. But I guess my point in this is, had I told him, no, we don't have any other offers on the table, and left it at that, do you think we would have gotten an offer for $15,000 over asking? I don't think so. Probably would have been maybe asking, but could have been even less, right? So to me, that holding that information back allowed my sellers at least $15,000 more. It did, yeah. So we were golden. We were golden, yeah. It worked out. So that's the power, to me, that's part of the power of negotiating. Now, did I get paid extra? Maybe a little bit, $15,000 more, but it really mattered to who? To my sellers, right? That $15,000 went a long way for them, right? And that's what makes it exciting. So that's when it comes to negotiation, kind of one of the general rules is if you can hold information back that isn't crucial. Now, let's say that you get an offer and the date is July 2nd that they wanted to close and you've got to close by July 31st. You could tell them that, hey, my seller's trying to move into this house. Again, if you had that conversation with your seller, but you also may not have to say that, but you could say, it works out better for my seller if we can move the date to this. And then if they have pushback, maybe you have some negotiating piece. One example that I use often is a washer and dryer or a fridge. Those are not by default included in the contract, right? And there's section 1.1 that talks about all the included items by default. A fridge, washer and dryer are not one of those. And so if my seller's planning to leave those behind, oftentimes I'll use those kind of as my negotiating tools to where if I do have something come up later on, I'll tell the seller, plan to leave those behind, but we won't be including them automatically in the listing in this case, so that maybe if a situation like that happens where I need to move the dates a few days earlier that benefits my seller, what I can give to the buyer is, hey, and we'll include the fridge along with it, right? So that way it's not free. I'm not just giving it away, but we're trading that for something that matters to my seller, right? So those are some of the things that you can use kind of in your tool belt, right? Deadlines, any of the terms in the rep sheet could be some of those things. But again, that's why it matters. It's so important to figure out what matters to your sellers and what doesn't really matter. So if the fridge doesn't really matter, okay, great. Then I can use that as a negotiating piece if it comes up or if the buyer's interested in that. So you kind of create your own little list of potential ways you can negotiate and give up something to benefit. All right. Just to wrap up, here's a couple other tips. So be professional. Obviously, keep your goal in mind. We talked about those. Pay attention to your communication and tone with anyone involved in the transaction. Continually refer to your client's motivation when you're speaking with them, right? So you want to bring that up not just one time or not just when it naturally comes up. When you're negotiating, kind of remind them when you're reviewing offers with your sellers and say, this is what we had talked about was important to you. This is what this offer has. Kind of go with that. Don't reveal too much. Listen more than talk. Keep your client's motivation close to your chest. Talked about that. And don't be attached to the outcome. We briefly mentioned that at the beginning where we talked about the commission, where you've got to just not be attached to the outcome. The reality is in real estate, there is no perfect home, right? Now there's some homes that work way better than others for your clients. So I'm not saying that there's never a time where they didn't get the right home, but if as much as possible, if we're not attached to the outcome, you'll see it happen in your careers where you'll be helping a client and you find a great home and either they decide not to get it or maybe they do put in an offer, but it goes to somebody else and they can be disappointed with that, right? But guess what? There will be another home that they're also going to love. There is low inventory right now, but there is still more than one home that works for a family, right? So don't be too attached to the outcome of that one particular transaction and just kind of put your best foot forward and move on. As your clients are seeing you do that, how might they feel? Yeah.
You know what you're doing. You know that there will be another.
Exactly. Yep. Whereas the flip side, if you do get emotional, be like, that was the one home that was going to work. How are they going to feel? They're like, well, great. Maybe we won't buy then, right?
I almost feel like you are their sense of confidence.
Yeah, totally. You are.
Because it's like innocent, it's so emotional. Like it's
Yeah.
just so emotional. And you have to have like a lighthouse.
Mm-hmm.
Not see it.
Yeah. Now, a lot of this happens too with over promising and under delivering, which is not what we want to do. We want to make sure we are under promising and over delivering. What I mean by that is, let's say, for example, you're selling a listing and you talk about in your listing consultation, yeah, the average days on market today is 29 days. My average is 3 days. I know we're going to get you an offer in the first 3 days. You're probably setting yourself up for failure. Now, that might happen. You might be able to do it, but I wouldn't guarantee anything like that because you don't know. You know your process and you can do everything you can, but you don't know what that's going to look out for yet. The same thing with if you're receiving offers, if you're the listing agent and you have people tell you that they're going to be sending in offers, very rarely will I ever tell my sellers that yet. Because why?
Set yourself up for failure.
Yeah, I don't want to get them excited that I'm having this offer coming by tonight, because either that offer, maybe it will come tonight and then I'm fine, or it may not come till tomorrow, but then that whole night they're thinking, that offer decided what's going on. They're getting worried about it, or they ultimately decide not to put in an offer at all, or the offer is worse than what they want. Like there's so many different things that can happen. And so I don't want to get their emotions all over the place to try to help keep things a little bit more neutral. I will only tell them what an offer is once we have it in hand and can show it to them. That's usually, on a rare occasion will I ever tell them more than that unless we have it in hand. So that's one of the ways to just kind of keep the emotions out of it and keep it a little bit more neutral. Okay. I think that's all we had for today. Any last ahas or comments or questions about negotiating? Thank you.
I think one thing I'm learning is that, when I come to training or classes, I'm like, how do you know? I'll say this so perfectly.
Sure.
But I think what just hit me a few minutes ago as I was listening to is that as I educate myself and see different examples, it's just gonna come to me, you know?
Yeah.
I feel like I've had experiences already with clients where I'm in a situation and it just goes so well. I'm like, how did I know how to say that? I haven't practiced, you know,
Sure.
those exact words or things like that, but I think I've been really nervous about trying to be like you or like,
Yeah,
you know, all these other amazing agents, and I don't need to do that. I just need
Right.
to educate myself and work hard, and then it's going to just happen. in
yeah.
the moment.
Well, I appreciate that, but that's one of my favorite things about the Ignite course is that it's not just me every time. I get to tell you my experience and what I've learned and what I've done, but guess what? What I've done and what I've done has not come from scratch from me from the start. I've taken the models and I've taken the things that from the classes I've been to and done those first. And then maybe, yeah, I've put my own spin on things here and there. But yeah, I think that's absolutely true, is that all of us are different and you got to be the best version of you. And maybe not everything that I said to you today bides well with you, and that's okay.
I think major take back is that success, especially the way you work, it comes from a place that's organic. And so it's not like lists of things that have to be checked off. It's more like boxes that we can pull from, you know?
Yeah.
And it becomes more of an organic, natural
Right.
progress.
Yeah, it's less robotic, right? It's more, this is a model, which no model is 100% perfect, and models don't mean that you have to go from here and then take this next step and then take this next step. Like, everybody's different and we're dealing with people, so things are going to be different, motivations are going to be different. So it's good to have an outline, it's good to have kind of a general idea of where you're headed, but you've got to be tuned in and focused in on them, and that will guide you to where you need to go. So yeah, awesome.
I think also, sorry, last thing.
You're good.
I think learning the model and following the model, it doesn't give you every single detail.
Yeah.
You know, what should I say in this text, right?
Right.
But I think just studying all of it as much as I can and then getting the feel for it. And then I'll kind of know, okay, this is kind of how I should apply this principle of overpromise, underdeliver, or just, you know, things like that. Then I'll know what to say in that text.
Yeah, exactly. That one's gotten me in trouble sometimes where I have overpromised. And so because it's hard, because sometimes you get excited, you want to tell them the good news and you want to tell them what you're going to do. But oftentimes I'll try to hold back a little bit, instead of, even if I know something's going to happen, tell them a little bit less of what that is, so that when it does happen, it's even that much more exciting. Right. But that way, if it also doesn't happen, emotions aren't too high, you know?
Well, you just look awesome when it does
Yeah.
happen, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Set yourself up. Great.
It's true. Okay, well, you guys are awesome. Thank you for being here. I learn a lot and I get a lot out of this as well myself. So thank you for giving me that opportunity and for your participation. It's been great. If there's ever anything I can do for you, I'm always here. That consultation form that I referenced and the exclusions, inclusions form, I can send it to you. You can change the logo to your name or whatever, adapt it your way. But I don't know how to send it to you other than getting your emails.
My Jacob Larson from Steve at Yahoo. And Larson's
So JACOBLARSEN. At what did you say?
an LLC.
Oh.
at Yahoo.
At yahoo.com.
Scam me.
Yeah. Oh, sweet. Okay, give me one sec. Otherwise, I'm gonna lose him.
I tried to reverse that. Notice anything. I thought, and it keeps saying that you're going the wrong way.
Okay,
So that's
perfect.
why I said,
Sweet. No, thank you. I will send that your way. And Jenna, or not Jenna, Alicia. Okay. It's a lot of work. Yeah. Yeah, makes sense. That works. I like it.